Hey guys, welcome back to part two of the first workshop of the self-empowerment sessions. So, in the first part of this, we covered some of the basic principles and some of the hidden information that's been taken away from us or concealed away for various reasons. Some nefarious, some just we're not ready for it yet. So, in part two, we're going to be looking more in depth at some of these other parts of the knowledge that we maybe are not very familiar with, that for whatever reason we haven't been exposed to. So as we go through this, just like you to take note of the various things here, and at the end of it, we'll have some exercises. So I hope you enjoy this. So let's start by having a look at some of the principles of nature. Now, everything from a magnetic field perspective is in the shape of a torus. Now, you might recall of seeing pictures of the Earth and the toroidal field going around the outside of the Earth, which is going from the positive to the negative and back around. So that's a torus, and a torus looks like a donut for those of you who are not very familiar with that shape. Second principle of nature is waves. Everything is in waves. Now this is a sine wave and a frequency wave, and going right back to some of the ancient wisdom, the for example, the Indian knowledge recognized that everything was vibration, everything was frequency. So a wave is obviously very symbolic of that. Now, wave and the waxing and waning of things, the way in which nature ebbs and flows, the tides, everything is going in waves. Now, another principle is expansion and contraction. For example, if we're breathing in and expanding the lungs, and then as we breathe out, we contract the lungs. In the way that we are born, we're innocent, and then we learn and we grow. In this case, we're from contraction to expansion, and then from there we start losing our mind or we start becoming less effective as we go towards old age. And if you look at the other cycles in relation to that, it's the birth death cycle, um, or various other principles in nature that reflect this expansion and contraction principle. Now, another principle of nature is the golden mean. Now, you'll see the golden mean ratio is a number ratio, and some would say that everything that is the construct of the universe and everything that we see around us is mathematical. So you have this spiral of the golden mean. Now, the golden mean you see there is a physical form of a rectangle and a curve. So the rectangles represent the male aspect, and if you were to draw this, it would be going to the left, and then the female is actually going to the right. So you have this moving to the left side of the brain and moving to the right side of creativity. So the difference between that, the law part, as we discussed in the first part of this workshop. So that's the golden mean. Now, interestingly enough, if you put two golden mean spirals together and you imagine that the golden mean also represents us and our natural life, we're actually conjoining with another person or another human being to join in matrimony or wedded matrimony or a relationship. You see the heart shape there, and that's really where the true symbol of the love heart comes from. It's not actually just the left and right ventricle of the heart, although the heart is a toroidal field as well. So you have this again, this contraction, expansion, contraction as the heart's beating. So in this case here, these are two hearts beating as one, if you will. Now you see that golden mean represented and phi represented in the building of the pyramids or the construction of the pyramid. Now the pyramid builders were not simple folk. They were very intelligent. They were very spiritual beings, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and they reflected that through the natural representation of phi. Now, the golden mean, coincidentally, is also connected with the shape of this credit card, and people fall in love with credit, or banks want you to fall in love with credit because credit is actually debt that you accumulate. So they'll give you credit, you accumulate debt out of that, and that's a perfect golden mean there. So where did we get that shape of the credit card from? From there. But also in nature, if you look at something like a flower, and you might make the comment or you might make the observation that that flower is beautiful. Well, what is beautiful? Why? Why is a flower beautiful, or a person, if you're looking at a attractive person? What makes them beautiful? And you actually find that it's because they are very closely correlated with the golden mean. So their face is in a ratio. For example, in the body, you see the Vitruvian Man, which is the drawing of Leonardo da Vinci, and you find that the length of this is the golden mean to the length of that. So the ratio is the same, and all throughout our body are these different ratios that make us perfect in the sense of perfect with nature. Now, everything in the principles of nature, everything is in equilibrium, and a state in which supply and demand for a given service is in balance, or good or services are in balance. Now, that's not to say that everything is balanced all the time, and you can just see that if you look out the window at the moment. We have this out of balance world that humanity has taken too much away from the planet, and now the planet is bringing itself back into equilibrium. It's like if you mow down a forest and leave it, it will actually reinstate itself. Now, saying that, the Hopi Indians would say that when you cut down a tree, you don't just destroy a tree, you destroy a community. Planting another tree doesn't reestablish that community straight away. It takes time, it takes trust, it takes generations, it takes all sorts of things to actually reconstitute a community within a forest. So another school of thought that's interesting is, spiritually, there was always people striving to balance your emotions all the time. That's not necessarily practical. Emotions is energy in motion, and it's emotion that makes the world go round. If someone annoys you and you don't have some emotional reaction to that, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, they're never going to change. If you're reticent about everything, it's just, oh yeah, okay, just keep doing what you're doing, then you're going to have this. You might be balanced, but you're not going to have any change or anything like that. I mean, even the gods got angry. So this equilibrium is about understanding that if you're too far one way, there is a effect. And we look at the principles of Hermes Trismegistus and the cause and effect. One of those principles there is that as you go out of balance one way, you bring into balance something else. Another principle of nature which comes from the Tao is Wu Wei. So this is like the snake swallowing its tail, but also it's about the path of least resistance. So, for example, if you want to split a piece of wood, you'd split it down the grain. You wouldn't try and cut it across the grain. And this is where some of these sayings come from, like, you're going against the grain, you're going against the flow. And in the second workshop, we actually look at this in more detail and how important flow actually is. So this is the idea of Wu Wei. Now, Wu Wei, if you take the Wei, Wei as in direction and path. So you could also say that Do is the way, and Do is in things like Karate Do, Taekwondo. They are pathways or ways of doing things. So I like the idea of, the doing the do or doing the do. That means that you're actually applying yourself. So when someone asks you, what are you doing? I'm doing the do. Now, some of the metaphysical energy systems that we have around us and within us, we have the auric field. So everything that has a physical form has a metaphysical field. That means that just as much as you can see, for example, if we're looking at something like this cup has a physical form, but it also has a metaphysical field around it, like an auric field. Now, just because this is supposedly an inanimate object and not a living organism, it doesn't have a field is totally incorrect. Everything has that. So we're going to look at the flow of the atom and the way in which the electron and the proton interact, and we find that the physical form is represented by one of those elements and the other one is the other. So just like an electrical current that flows through a cable, it actually produces an auric field around it, and very high tension wires, you can't get too close to them, otherwise, even though you can't see it, you'll get electrocuted. You don't have to touch it. So everything has that metaphysical field. So in the case of our auras can be very close to our body, or they can be up to 6 feet out from our body, depending on how much vitality we have. So everything has that metaphysical field. Now, when I talk about the chakras are the energy centers. The energy centers are stimulated by the 7 major planets. So each one of those planets has a correlation to one of those energy centers. So seeing at the bottom there where you've got the first, which is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and indigo and violet, I should say. Each of those relates to the energy centers of those planets. Now, our planet actually has several energy centers as well. And these are the chakras of the planet. Now, our planet's a living organism. As I said before, expansion and contraction is actually is growing and dying, growing and dying. So you have this birth and death relationship, and it's breathing. So we would say, for example, that the trees, which are the lungs of the, or even the Amazon, if you want to be more specific, are the lungs of the planet. They are actually breathing in carbon dioxide during the day and expressing oxygen, and then vice versa at night. So they have this whole idea of breathing in and breathing out. So the whole thing is a living organism, and our oceans are really important. Now, what's interesting here is that if you look at this map, you see little old New Zealand down on the right-hand side. And what's really exciting and significant about New Zealand is that the colored points on that map are actually the chakras, but the other ones that are little vortices are actually the energy elemental vortices on the planet. And we're fortunate enough within New Zealand, and fortunate enough where I live, which is only 40 minutes away from Rotoponamu, that is actually the water vortex for the entire planet. Now that's a counterclockwise spinning vortex. The antipodean of that, or the antipodes of that, where it goes through the center of the planet and comes out the other side, is actually Glastonbury Tor, which is in the UK. So that's why this is a female vortex going in anti-clockwise into the earth, and that's the water element expressing itself, and that's why you have a Tor on the other side, which is symbolic of the male phallic symbol. So interestingly, now on the human body, we have the 7 chakras, the 7 energy centers. So we have the base chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown chakra. So those are all represented there in that graphic, and different colors relating to those different chakras. And we're going to go through some exercises in the second workshop in regards to flow and actually seeing how we can energize and help to stimulate those particular chakras. Now on the top you see the crown chakra, and that's the 1,000-petaled lotus. How that actually works in respect of enlightenment is that's the light that comes on. That's the light bulb. When you have a light bulb moment, that's where you blow your mind. So that's actually blowing away the cobwebs and opening up your mind to more information. So that's the thing that actually comes on, the light bulb, so to speak. So, a lot of these sayings like light bulbs just come on, they're actually got some correlation with some energy fields that, although we can't see, obviously someone's perceived that and then was able to tell us, hey, by the way, your crown chakra is just lit up. So in the body, we also have what was called the nadis. Now we have 3 of these, 3 significant ones. Now this is not to mention the Chinese energy meridians that are throughout our body, and these correlate to the central nervous system. But these nadis actually come from India, and we have the Ida, which is the female aspect. So the body can be divided in half. So you think of the left side of the body is actually controlled by the right brain. Now the right brain is based on creativity, art, the female aspect. So that's the drawing in. And then on the left side of the body, or the right side of the body, is the male aspect. So the male aspect relates to the Pingala. So that is controlled by the left brain, which is the logical, calculatable male aspect of the brain. And so you have these Ida and Pingala. So when you actually breathe in, you have these 2 sensitive receptors at the top of the nasal passage. And from there, when you breathe the air, the chi actually comes in and it goes down through these Ida and Pingala, depending on which one's more active, and they are different activities during the day. So in balance, they'd be going through each of these chakras as they go down to the base chakra. At the base chakra, the third one is called the Sushumna. So the Sushumna is a shaft that comes straight up the spine, straight through the crown chakra, and comes out. And this is why you see this idea of the caduceus. So this is what the symbol actually means. So you have the crown chakra on top, you have the wings, which are actually the energy flowing out, and then you have the two serpents. These are also closely related to Kundalini and the Kundalini Yoga and Kundalini Fire, which is the coiled serpent at the base of the spine. So again, activating that gives us this energy, and that's represented in the staff of Hermes and also the rod of Mercury, which we find later on is actually one and the same. Now, the other way that metaphysical energy systems are represented, especially in places like Japan, this is a Godai, or a Godanto actually. Now, Godanto means the 5 elemental forms. So at the base, you have the square, which is representing the earth element. You have the circle, which is the water element. The triangle or the pyramid, that's the fire element. Above that is the half moon, or which can be seen in alchemy as the crucible underneath on top of the fire element, on top of the other merged elements together. And the fifth element is actually the jewel of the Godanto. So here's a picture that you'd see in Japan, typically in a cemetery, an older cemetery, and it's just lined with heaps and heaps of Godantos. Now, some of the ancient wisdom that we wanted to cover here, you might have heard the terms about Atlantis and Lemuria, and specifically Lemuria. Now, Lemuria, you've also got Mu, and you can see this map here shows 3 different areas. Mu was actually a triangle more or less between Hawaii, New Zealand, and Rapa Nui or Easter Island. And there was, before the oceans rose, there was actually land bridges across all of these areas and all these lands, and Lemuria was very synonymous with that. On the other side, you see Atlantis. Now, Atlantis, one of the main colonies, and everything obviously went underwater, according to the myths of Plato, or what Plato wrote about. Atlantis was actually where the Canary Islands are. And it's funny how you've got people, explorers like James Cameron, sort of floating around the Mediterranean and the Atlantic trying to find Atlantis, when ironically, someone had actually said that the Canary Islands airline that obviously flies to Canary Islands from Spain actually has the only airline that flies to Atlantis. Now, also, if you follow some of the lectures and the writings of Matthias di Stefano, who actually recalls all of his past lives right back to Atlantis and tells you all about what life was like in Atlantis, he'll also tell you the same. So it's interesting the ignorance, or maybe they're just trying to make money of some of these explorers. And when you've got people who will tell you their experiences, and the more and more of these people are coming out to tell you their experiences. Now, Atlantis was around 9,600 BC, so it goes back quite a way before the flood. Now, when there was the flood, some of these ascended masters from Atlantis went to 3 parts of the world, into the highlands. So they went to Tibet, they were the Mayans, and they were the Egyptians. So from those, that's where you got that higher ascended knowledge. Now, one of the main characters within Atlantis was someone named Thoth, or Tahuti, and he was credited with inviting a lot of the arts and sciences, well, all of the arts and sciences actually, and he was the son of Enki. So if you follow some of the deciphering of the cuneiform tablets that were found in Iraq, which was ancient Sumeria, there were something like 20,000 tablets. Now, there was a person named Zechariah Sitchin who actually decoded these cuneiform tablets, and it actually gave a whole rundown of the history of the world. And it talked about Enki and his brother Enlil, and how Enlil wanted the flood, and because humanity had got out of hand, had got out of control, they were doing all sorts of silly things they shouldn't have been doing, and basically ignoring the principles of God and being good to people. So there was actually wars between Lemuria and the Atlantis people as well. So Thoth was actually the son of Enki. Now Thoth lived for 45,000 years, and this is recorded also in the Emerald Tablets. Now the Emerald Tablets were found in the Great Pyramid, and they since have disappeared, but they were decoded. And the Emerald Tablets are actually in you can follow them on YouTube if you want to listen to the whole account of the Emerald Tablets. And just like you have the Kabbalion, which is actually the principles of Thoth, and Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes was actually Thoth. So Hermes was the Greek god, Hermes Trismegistus, and he was also to the Romans the god Mercury. So that's why it was called Hermes Trismegistus, which is thrice majestic. In other words, 3 times majestic in the sense of the 3 representations of the same God. So very interesting. Now, just on that, if you think about someone who's lived for 45,000 years and has made observations of the world and the things around him, just how wise that person would be. I mean, we have a limited lifespan of around about 100 years, and we might be observant as much as we can. We might notice a couple of things. You imagine over 45,000 years. And a lot of these people and claims to have lived for a long time. If you look in the Bible in the Old Testament, I think it was Moses lived to about 800 years old. Noah lived to 900 years old. So, they lived a long time. So Hermeticism, which is Hermes Trismegistus and his philosophies, initially that was astrology that went to astronomy, and that was the operation of the stars. You had magic or theurgy that went to science. Now theurgy was actually the encouragement or the use of other forces, and they could be elemental forces, they could be gods, bringing those in to actually help to achieve things. Now, in today's modern world, there are accusations that some of these really good magicians are actually using demons to assist them, and you take that with a grain of sand. What are they really achieving, and what are they doing for the world? Are they doing bad things or good things? And the third one was alchemy, which ended up being chemistry. And this was relating to the operation of the sun. So the sun in the sense of not only sun, but a play on words of son and son of God, and the skills of the Magi and the skills of Jesus. Okay, so one thing that's interesting about Jesus, just digressing for a second, is that the life of Jesus isn't fully recorded, not in the Bible. And when you look back at the Council of Nicaea and how they hid a lot of that information, especially in writings around Jesus, the account of Jesus going to the east when he was 13 years old, he was extremely wise, obviously. He was actually lecturing the temple priests in Jerusalem when he was 12 years old. So he got a lot of knowledge. Someone actually asked me once who Jesus was. And from my understanding and my studies, he was a 11th dimensional Arcturian ascended master. Okay, so Arcturus is from another place, the number of dimensions. He's very high in the dimensional understandings, and he was a ascended master. So he came down to teach us things. And we'll go into that later on in some of these workshops. But essentially, from the age of 13 to the age of about 28, he said he was traveling to the east. Now, there are accounts of him in the east. There are accounts of him in India, in Nepal, and in Tibet. And in fact, one of the interviews with the Dalai Lama, they used to call him Isa, or they knew him as Isa in the east. And he had a whole lot of writings behind him, all from Jesus, or Isa as it was called in the east there, before he went back. And then, of course, he was crucified, and there was some argument around whether he actually died on the cross, which technically wasn't physically possible. On the resurrection, he actually returned to India, and he actually died in India, and there is places that claim to have his body buried in India. So yeah, an alternative story, and you can imagine how that would upset some of the Christian faith who believe that, he died for our sins when he didn't actually die. Now, the seven principles, Hermetic principles of Hermes Trismegistus. The first one, and these relate to the seven principles and the seven chakras in the body. The first one is the all is mind, the universe is mental. So everything that you believe in, or everything that you do, starts with your mental thought first before it manifests into something physical. So you have an idea. You have an idea to build something, to write something. Anything starts from the mind. So all is mental. The second one is the law of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. So what it's really saying is that the microcosm is the same as the macrocosm. The atom is the same as the black hole. Everything that is small is just a bigger model of the macrocosm and the microcosm. If you look into the idea of fractality, that's really interesting. Where you look at, say, for example, a tree. You look at the branches. The branches follow the same shape as the tree. Then the leaves follow the same shape as the branch, and then within the leaves are the veins, and the veins follow the same of all of those things as well. So it's the macrocosm going to the microcosm. So that's the law of correspondence. The law of vibration. Now, we talked about that before when we were looking at everything as a wave. So nothing rests, everything moves and everything vibrates. So everything is moving, even though you're looking at something solid like the table that maybe you're sitting something on and it doesn't look like it's moving, it is still vibrating. Rhythm. Now that's, the law of vibration. Also, speech is really important. So in the beginning was the word, the speech, the mantra, incantations, all of those things encapsulate vibration. Now, rhythm, everything flows in and out, everything has its tides, and all things arise and fall. Now, that's where we're talking about expansion and contraction. Now, this relates to the heart chakra. So, again, everything's flowing through the heart, it flows in and out. It has its tides, it's empty, it's full, it's empty, it's full. So, everything has that rhythm. We walk to the beat of our own drum, so to speak. Now, the fifth one is cause and effect. Every cause has an effect, and every effect has its cause. Now, cause and effect in the sense that karma. So, Isaac Newton, who was actually an alchemist, he created the third law, which was to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Or in the Bible, as you sow, so shall you reap. So, this recognition of everything that has a cause has an effect. That again is about that equilibrium that we look at later on. The sixth one is gender, is in everything and manifests on all planes. So gender, not just in the physicality of the male and the female organs, but the nature of the male, the masculine and the feminine. So, for example, within a flower, group of flowers or a couple of trees, you always need a male and a female to reproduce. So you have this idea of gender. Now that's on all planes. So everything requires a male and a female aspect. Now there are cases where you see some of the gods and it's hard to figure out whether they're actually male or female. And in that sense, the gods were actually androgynous. They still had the male and female aspects within them, but they were androgynous in the sense that they had both in equilibrium. Now the seventh one is polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has its opposites. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. So what that means is that you've got the two ends of a stick. So you might have the top and the bottom. Now you could say that they're at opposite ends of the stick, but they're still part of the whole, which is the stick. You could say that water, you don't have hot water and cold water. It's just different degrees of temperature that defines whether it's hot or whether it's cold. So those are the seven Hermetic principles. Now the seven Hermetic principles were actually here before anything. So they form the construct of everything. And it's said that if you understand the seven Hermetic principles, you understand not only the universe, but you can control the universe. And essentially, what we're looking at here in Hermes Trismegistus is the alchemist stone. So the alchemist stone isn't a physical stone as such. Some may say it could be, but effectively it's a sacred geometry set of forms. So in this depiction here, he's got a compass and he's drawing around the outside. Consequently or coincidentally, the compass and the square are the symbols of Freemasonry, and there's a very important reason why they are, because they follow the Hermetic principles as well. So you have the four elements, actually five. You have the earth element represented by the square. You have the water element represented by the circle within the square. You have the fire element represented by the triangle. You have the air element represented by the inner circle. And then you have the ether, which is represented by the outside of the circle. So that represents those five elements, just as we saw in the Goronto, you had the five elements. So what are these elements? Well, if we look at them here, they relate to matter. Now, these are just different representations of the same thing. So you've got the Platonic solids, you've got the Goronto we looked at before, and you've got the alchemic symbols. So the earth element represents matter. The water element represents the emotions. The fire element represents the will or the intention. The air element represents the thought, thinking, mind, mental. And ether, that represents, again, the mind. So the thought is the lower than the mind. The mind encompasses everything. All is mind. That was the principles of Hermes Trismegistus. So in the elemental forms also, we have things like stupas representing the elements. These are dotted all around Tibet, the Tibetan Buddhism, and throughout Nepal, you'll see those stupas or chortens. And then in Japan, the pagoda. So you notice there's 7 levels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sorry, representing the 5 elements as well, not the 7 chakras. Now, there's also the principles of the elements within magic. So, for example, when you look at manifestation, the earth element actually encapsulates or contains whatever it is that's it's holding in place. Water actually attracts. So, if you wanted to attract something, you would use the water element or the circle to attract. The fire element actually projects or explodes, so you'd use that to direct energy at a certain thing or whatever. And the air element actually transmutes, so you'd use the air element like the philosopher's crucible to change or transmute from one state to another. And then the ether is actually the life force, so that encompasses everything. Now, the natural elements are present everywhere. For example, in a tree, you don't get a tree growth without the earth element, where it's taking the nutrients and minerals from the earth. The water, which it requires to leach out those elements and those nutrients. So it needs water. It needs the sunlight of the fire element for photosynthesis. And it needs the air element. So we talked about needing oxygen at night and producing carbon dioxide, and then during the day taking carbon dioxide in and producing oxygen. So it needs that for photosynthesis, and it needs ether or the life force. Now, the life force encompasses everything. And if you think of the human body, for example, if we just thought that just eating would sustain us and would give us enough energy, and yet a lot of people eat a lot of garbage, they still have energy. Where does that energy come from? And actually, when you sleep, you replenish your life force as well. So it's really important, that idea of sleep, and I also the idea of meditation. Now, that's just not in physical things. Man-made things also require all the elements. So, for example, you've got the earth relating to the block, to the physicality of it, the internal combustion engine. The water could be the fuel and the cooling system. Fire is obviously relating to the spark and explosion within the cylinders. And the air is relating to the oxygen required to create that spark. And if any one of those is missing, you have problems with your engine, it won't start. Now, ether or the life force, it's quite interesting. Believe it or not, if you have a bad vibe, or if you give a bad vibe to something that's running and it has that electromagnetic field around it, it can actually influence the performance of that. Many years ago, the racing driver Peter Brock got in trouble with General Motors because he actually produced this thing called the Orgone polarizer, and that's ether. Orgone is ether. And General Motors thought it was a load of hocus pocus, but Peter Brock swore black and blue that it actually helped with the performance of his vehicles, and General Motors cut his contract because of that. So again, this is prejudice just because they didn't believe in it. It's just ridiculous. Now the Chinese elements, I should not just ignore them. So you've got the 5 elements, but they're a little bit different. They actually have wood, metal, fire, water, and earth. So they have the wood and the metal rather than the air and the ether. So in this case here, you've got the constructive cycle. So wood produces fire by feeding it naturally. Fire produces earth by producing ashes. Earth produces metal by contracting. Metal produces water. It liquefies. And water produces wood by stimulating its growth. So that's a constructive cycle. On the other side of that is what we call the destructive, because everything has a yin and a yang, a negative and a positive. And so the destructive cycle is where the wood destroys the earth by exhausting it, so it sucks all the nutrients out. Earth destroys water by absorbing it. Water destroys fire by extinguishing it, obviously, and so forth. Interestingly, how this destructive cycle is also the same form as a pentagram. So when you actually see that, it's not necessarily the symbol of the devil. It could be reflecting something such as this. Now, if we're relating the elements to, say, the tactical elements of anything, and we said the internal combustion engine, but you could also apply it to, say, for example, the tactical elements of a sports team. So in this case here, you've got a soccer team, and you can relate the elements of the earth to the defenders and the goalie, because they're standing their ground. They're taking the, as I said before, they're actually encapsulating the incoming ball to stop it from getting into the goal. You've got the defenders, which is water. And now those guys, when the attacker's coming in, they actually will receive the attack and they will move the ball up. So they're acting like a wave, if you like, this motion of a wave. The fire, now these guys are the attackers, so the defenders would pass the ball to the attackers. They would be moving up and forcing their way through the defense. Now on the side, you've got the wingers. Now they're related to the wings of a bird, if you like, and the wingers go up the wings or the sides. Now they're typically the air element. And then, of course, you've got the guy standing on the side shouting at everybody and seeing the broader perspective, and he's relating to the ether or the control of the whole team. And that's the coach, of course. Now, in most cases, people who are in professional sports teams have actually gravitated towards these different roles because of their elemental makeup. And we all have predominant elements that we are comfortable with, and that is our talent. And so the wingers would be the air elements. And we look at this in astrology in the next workshop. Now, another interesting place where I have a personal interest in is the military tactical elements. Now, the reason I'm bringing this in is because the military and police and ambulance, those people are at the front line. They're really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So it's a life and death situation to them. So there's a natural involvement here in regards to strategy and the idea of tactical elements where air is evading, fire is attacking, water is defending, and earth is receiving. Now we also have the 5 different components of our military. So we have the army, the navy, the counterterrorism or attack force, and the air force, and also the intelligence. Now, if you look at somewhere like the SAS, for example, they have the mountain troop, boat troop, counterterrorism, air troop, and of course command. So again, they're reflecting those elements. And then if you break that down, within a troop, you have 5 main people. The commander, the comms guy. Now he's related to the air element because comms is going through the air. Terrorism. Now, the fire element. Now he's the breacher. He's the one who gets them into places through explosives. You have the linguist. So the linguist is the toing and froing of language between maybe you and the enemy or you and someone else. And then finally, you have the medic. Now, the medic is like the person who provides the medicines, the ground stuff that you grind up, but the pharmaceuticals that are solid that go into the body and dissolve in the body to help the body recover from things. Now, within the body, there are the elements as well. So you've got the 7 chakras. You've also got relating to those at the base, the earth element. At the sacral, you've got the water element. You've got the fire element at the solar plexus, hence the fire, the sun, the solar. And you've got the air element relating to the heart chakra. So you've got a microcosm of the elements in mini Goronto, if you like, within those first 4 chakras. And then the 5th is a combination. It's actually a triangle, or it could be a diamond in this case here. So that's the 5th element. That's the ether. So that's what the higher chakras actually govern the body. Now on a bigger scale, you've got the earth element relating to the area of the legs, the foundation, if you like, and the structure. You've got the water element relating to the flow of the body. You've got the fire element relating to the intention, and also relating to the tools, the arms and the hands, and pretty much how we do most of our work. You've got the air element relating to our strategy and our vision and the way in which we direct the rest of the body. And then you've got the mind relating to the ether. Now, within these elements, you can also bring the entire element into the body. So, for example, if you wanted to be more stable, you would bring in the earth element. If you wanted to be more fluid getting through a day, you would bring in the water element. If you wanted to be more aggressive, or not mad and angry, but if you wanted to get somewhere quicker, you bring in the fire element. If you wanted to use your intellect more and your intuition, you could bring in the air element. And we normally do that naturally through things such as yoga and self-hypnosis. Now, the other thing that people need to understand is that the elements are used to balance everything. So, for example, if you're feeling a bit lightheaded, you would want to go and ground yourself. So you'd use the earth element. So that could actually be anything from breathing in the earth element, wearing the color gray, or wearing the colors relating to the earth, to also going outside in your bare feet and actually bringing in the earth element just through making contact with the ground. And we don't do a lot or enough of that. We need to do more of this grounding, because we're always wearing rubber-soled shoes. We live in houses that aren't earthed apart from the electrical system. So we need to do that. In fact, now you can actually buy mats and rugs that you can plug into your earth so that you're getting that direct earth. And it's something that makes a big difference to your health and well-being. Also in the water element. So with the earth element, we balance by consuming internally or experiencing externally. So you've got this idea of this inner and outer balance. Within the water element, you would obviously be drinking the water to help you balance. Some people overbalance by drinking alcohol, and then that causes all sorts of other problems as well. It doesn't solve their problem, it just masks it for a while and then causes more problems. But that water element, you could externally immerse yourself in the water element. So again, that idea of balancing by going for a swim, walking in the rain, doing misogi, which is meditation under water, or cold water swimming, are all ways of balancing. In the fire aspect, again, exercising is internal, so you're actually burning up that imbalance. Sometimes when people get angry, they'll go and do something physical. They'll go and chop a heap of wood or something just to express that fire element internally. Externally, it'd be a matter of sunbathing or getting that vitamin D in the sun. Now, the problem with the sun is that it's so intense that you get burnt very easily. But the idea was that immersion, or even just staring into a fire or sitting around a fire at night, is a good way to balance. With the air element, again, it's the breathing. So you're breathing in the air and breathing out. Some people use things like smoking. Again, it brings in, it's unnatural and it brings in other problems, but it's a good excuse to sigh. So, sometimes when you're trying to release, you let out this sigh. And of course, people who are smoking are sighing all the time. They remove stress by deep breath and breathing out. Of course, they're breathing in bad stuff. So then again, that's internalizing. Externally, going for a walk in a forest, you're getting the earth element as well if you're in bare feet, but you're getting all that oxygen and breathing out that carbon dioxide. So again, that visualization of, as you're walking through the forest, taking deeper breaths and actually breathing in that natural element. So that's really important as well. So you can balance out that way. So let's have a look at bringing in the elements. So there are 4 different postures that we can use to bring in the elements. The first one is actually sitting cross-legged or comfortably with your with your legs in a 90 degrees. So that's forming half of the square, and you've got your hands on your knees, and you're joining your fingers and your thumb together. In this case here, your third finger and your thumb, because that represents the earth element, and you would be breathing in those elements. So this also helps with breathing in that earth element, and sitting on the earth would be even better as well. Okay, so you're bringing in that square into that lower part of the body. Now with the water element, you'd bring the hands together and join the thumbs together in this way. And when you're breathing in, you're visualizing this circle. Now if you're bringing in the Gorento, this would be the second part you're bringing in. So you've brought in the earth element, and you do that 7 times. Then you'd move to the water element. You'd bring this in. So you'd place your hands in this position. The next one would be the fire element. So the hands are in this position in the shape of a triangle, with the tips of your fingers at the base of the nose and your elbows coming down to sit above the water element. And this is a red color because it's fire, and the triangle sits here like this. So you're breathing in 7 times the fire element and breathing out the imbalance, so on top of the water element. The air element is placing your hands up like this and allowing the air to come in like the half moon. So you're breathing in the yellow, the air, and you're bringing it into this part of the body sitting on top of the fire element. And then finally the ether element, you actually had your hands up the top of your head in the shape of a diamond. And as you're breathing in, you're visualizing the white light coming in to the top of the head, the crown chakra, if you like. So you can bring in the elements through flowing. So once you've done this exercise 7 times at each of those different centers of the elements, you can then bring these in. So when you inhale, you're coming up, you're coming down through the center, you're changing over at the heart for the water element, and then you're going out to your knees. That's the inhale. Now on the exhale, do the opposite. So from earth, you're breathing out, you're bringing into the clutching hands together in the water element, you're changing at the heart for the fire element, you're coming up, and then you're releasing that air out and bringing the hands back to the legs, back to the knees. And then when you breathe in, you're coming back around, you're coming down, changing, and then out to the knees, breathing out, do the reverse. Each time you're visualizing each of those energy centers as you breathe out. So you're coming back in through air, fire, water, and earth. Breathing out from earth, water, change at the heart, fire, air. And do this for as long as you feel that you're getting that balance going. Make sure you're breathing deeply. Now, if you don't understand the idea of the way yoga breathing works, it's like a conduit. So what you're actually doing is you're breathing in through your nose, but you imagine breathing in, bringing the elements in all the way down into your abdomen. You're expanding your abdomen out, and then as you breathe out, you're compressing that, and it's forcing the air up through that channel and out again. So you can imagine it like 2 triangles as well. So you're breathing into the center here, and then it's expanding out. So again, you've got this idea of contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. Okay, think of that as well. So there again is reflecting that principle of contraction, expansion. And so that's the way to balance the elements. But as I said before, if you wanted to bring in a specific element, now one thing that as we go along in these workshops and self-empowerment is looking at conscious magic. Now, I was giving the example before of wearing different colored shorts when I used to get up in the morning, and I'd wear a pair of yellow shorts, or I might throw on a pair of blue shorts or red shorts or gray shorts, and I had the 4 colors there. And it wasn't until I sort of started thinking, now why did I choose that color? that I looked at the moon calendar and found that the moon was actually in the element of that color of those shorts that I was desiring to wear at that point in time. So that's what we would call unconscious magic. Now, the thing is with the colors, with conscious magic, to enhance the color, you could actually bring in those, wear those colors as well. So if you really wanted to be assertive with the fire element, you could actually bring in the fire element to the whole body and at the same time be wearing red as you went out on your day. So if you wanted to be assertive, you're going to, I don't know, a meeting or something and you wanted to bring across your point, just be careful that you don't get carried away. If you find that you've got too much fire, start drinking glasses of water or earthing yourself and try and balance it out. But just be careful when you bring in these elements. Now, whatever you bring in, you should release to keep in balance. So if you breathe the elements in 7 times, make sure you remove them 7 times as well. Okay. Now, just moving on. Here's just some reference material that you can look up in regards to some of the suppliers of this information that I follow on places like YouTube and books. Now, it's interesting that the Library of Alexandria had about 500,000 books in it. And when you look at people like Thoth, he was said to have written something like 35,000, or Hermes, sorry, 35,000 books, Thoth Hermes. They were in the Library of Alexandria. And of course, the library was burnt down by the Romans, pretty much obliterated. But a lot of the copies of those books are still out, hidden in circulation. Now we have the internet. And again, the internet's not perfect. There is a lot of charlatans on the internet. There's a lot of nonsense on the internet. So it's a matter of cross-referencing everything that you see and read. Now, the ancient reference material, I talked about the Kybalion. That is the 7 principles of Hermetic philosophy. And you see the Philosopher's Stone represented there. This is by the 3 initiates. You can hear the readings of these on YouTube, which is really good if you're driving somewhere and you just want to listen to them. The Emerald Tablets are also on YouTube. Someone has read those out. Very long-winded, quite an interesting language, but it was published by the Library of Alexandria, ironically enough. But yeah, the all of the Emerald Tablets of Hermes and all the principles and philosophies interesting. Zecharia Sitchin, I mentioned before, he's got quite a few books out. Now, he was the one that decoded the Sumerian tablets that came out of Iraq. Erich von Däniken, now he's been around a long time. Chariots of the Gods is one of the books that he wrote, and it talks about the extraterrestrials coming to the planet to populate the planet and such things. And that's also backed up by Zecharia Sitchin's decoding of those Sumerian tablets. Matthias Di Stefano, I talked about him. So he is a gentleman who's fairly young, but he recalls all of his past lives all the way back to Atlantis and Lemuria. If you follow or can subscribe to Gaia, it's a, I hate to say the word new age, it's a spiritual channel that has a lot of presenters on it, including Matthias Di Stefano, and there is a lot of information in there. It's fantastic. Marlene Seven Bremner, now she's done a lot of work with the Hermeticism and alchemy. And for her age, she's only reasonably young, probably compared to me. She has a wealth of knowledge. And again, you can find her on YouTube and on Gaia. Fascinating person. Gary Wayne. Now, we talked about giants in the first section here. Now, Gary Wayne has written a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And he actually talks all about the giants and all of the tribes of the giants and how they all connected. And the post-Diluvian giants that were still around after the flood. And yeah, he's done so much good work. It's amazing. Now, modern wisdom, Dr. Stephen Greer, ET Contact. Now, we are going to get into that and later on in the workshops. And Stephen Greer actually has done quite a few documentaries. He was a medical doctor. He's very highly respected. But he's actually created something called Serious Disclosure and just looking at some of the ET contact and information out there in regards to extraterrestrials. And you'll find not only his work very fascinating, but very compelling He's done a lot of homework towards that. Now, another very interesting person, he's a mathematician, Robert Edward Grant, or Robert E. Grant. Again, he's fascinating in decoding a lot of the mathematical equations and things around the pyramids, around sacred geometry. Very interesting person. And finally, Aubrey Marcus. Now, Aubrey Marcus is an entrepreneur. He interviews a lot of these people. He's done a lot of podcasts, and you can find him again on the internet. So, yeah, fascinating person. So, going back to the old adage of seek and you'll find in Matthew 7:7, you don't get anywhere by sitting there and waiting for information to come to you, although it can work that way. Go out and actually go on your own journey of self-discovery and of discovery of what's really going on out there. And I hope this stimulates you into looking for things.